And now I give the floor to the distinguished representative of the Congo to introduce an address by the head of state.
Madam, Excellencies, dear colleagues, it is my most distinguished honor and privilege to introduce the pre-recorded address by His Excellency Denis Sassou Nguesso, President of the Republic of Congo, at the general debate of the 75th session of the General Assembly. I thank you.
Mr. President of the General Assembly, Mr. Secretary General of the United Nations, I would like, Mr. President, to convey to you my warm congratulations on your election as President of the 75th regular session of the United Nations General Assembly. Allow me also to pay a well-deserved tribute to Mr. Tijani Muhammad Bande, your predecessor. A well-deserved tribute for his work during the 74th General Assembly. I wish to convey all my gratitude to Mr. Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations, for his perseverance in seeking solutions to the various challenges confronting the international community. Mr. President, the world is currently faced with an unprecedented health crisis, which is highlighting the glaring gaps between the health systems of developed countries and the health systems of developing countries in terms of their capacity to respond to major pandemics. A situation such as this compels bilateral and multilateral stakeholders alike to seek appropriate resources to tackle this pandemic, which is seriously affecting the survival of humanity. It behooves us, therefore, to step up our international solidarity geared toward harmonious and complementary organization of strategies to eradicate this pandemic. Mr. President, I note with particular interest the scope of the theme of this general debate. And by this I mean the future we want, the United Nations we need, reaffirming our collective commitment to multilateralism, confronting coronavirus through effective multilateral action. The real challenge facing the entire international community, given the scale of the economic and health impact of this scourge, is actually to strengthen multilateral cooperation mechanisms in our fight against the coronavirus. That is our challenge, given this scourge. Let no one be deceived. We cannot emerge from this unprecedented health crisis, and there will be no development in isolation. The United Nations remains, therefore, the main forum for mobilizing states as part of an effort to reach a compromise or even a consensus around collective action against inequalities and vulnerabilities. Given the difficult global economic situation, a reaffirmation of multilateralism is the foundation, essential foundation we need for international action to deliver on our collective commitments, and more particularly, to ensure that we provide access to universal health coverage, to ensure that we promote education for all, and to ensure that we protect the environment and preserve lasting peace. Mr. President, even though we are celebrating the 75th anniversary of the United Nations, and despite the progress made, we are still witnessing the resurgence of unsustainable, unacceptable shortages for peoples. Therefore, instituting health for all is encountering real difficulties. Eradicating poverty in all its forms remains an international priority. Nevertheless, we will not achieve these goals unless states actually have the resources needed and have them in a world that is truly at peace. Mr. President, the Republic of the Congo is concerned at the resurgence of terrorism and violent extremism, as well as at the predominance of armed conflicts across the world. Our concern also extends to the Libyan crisis, the ramifications of which are increasingly affecting the countries of the Sahel. And here I wish to say that my country, which is serving as president of the high-level committee of the African Union on Libya, reaffirms the primacy of a political solution conducive to holding an inter-Libyan conference that is inclusive and focused on national reconciliation. The various meetings held in Brazzaville and the Berlin Conference on Peace in Libya encouraged the parties to this conflict to focus on dialogue and to do so in the framework of a multilateral approach that includes the United Nations. And to this end, the roadmap adopted on the 30th of January 2020 in Brazzaville remains valid. The eastern part of the Democratic Republic of the Congo is still under threat from armed groups. And in the same vein, the Central African Republic, which is preparing for presidential elections in December 2020, is facing a situation that has been made unstable because of the bloody campaigns of armed gangs. Syria, for its part, is still confronted, as it has been since 2011, with a civil war with devastating consequences. Israelo-Palestinian relations remain tenuous despite the relevant United Nations resolutions advocating for the creation of two independent states. Furthermore, the situation in the Republic of Cuba calls for the lifting of unilateral sanctions in accordance with the Charter of the United Nations. Lastly, the 75th anniversary of the United Nations coincides with the anniversary of the first nuclear test. Humanity owes it to itself to put an end once and for all to the use of nuclear weapons. Mr. President, as we celebrate the 75th anniversary of the United Nations, there is still a historic injustice which is yet to be redressed. It is to be redressed by guaranteeing Africa a place in the Security Council. As a member of the Committee of 10 of the African Union on reform of the United Nations Security Council, my country solemnly reaffirms the urgency of making it a reality, making a reality Africa's representation in this organ of the United Nations. In so doing, we will further strengthen the values of peace, of solidarity, equity, and progress embodied by the United Nations organization. Long live the United Nations. Long live international cooperation. Thank you.
En nombre de la Asamblea General.
On behalf of the General Assembly, I wish to thank the President of the Republic of Congo for the statement just made.